Ethan Carter had always been skeptical. As a journalist, he thrived on logic, evidence, and facts. But sometimes even the most steadfast reporter couldn't escape the gravity of strange stories. That was why he found himself in a small, remote town on the edge of a mysterious forest in the Pacific Northwest. The town, Gray Hollow, had always been a place of quiet. The kind of place people visited once, then never returned. And those who stayed, well, they kept to themselves. The locals rarely ventured into the surrounding wilderness, and even fewer dared to talk about it. But there were whispers of disappearances, of strange howls echoing from the depths of the forest, and of a creature that no one had ever seen. Ethan was sent to uncover the truth. The legend of the phantom wolf was well known in the town, though few openly discussed it. An ancient story passed down through generations. It told of a creature that guided lost travelers deeper into the forest. The wolf, with glowing eyes and an ethereal presence, was said to lure people away from the path, leading them into the wilderness where they would vanish without a trace. Some townsfolk claimed it was a supernatural force, a protector of the forest turned vengeful. Others scoffed, chalking it up to the wild imaginations of those too afraid to face the real dangers of the forest. Ethan, of course, dismissed it as folklore, but his editor had insisted. People had gone missing in the woods, and it was his job to find out why. When he arrived, he began asking around, but most locals were too reluctant to share their stories. He met an elderly man named Bill, who had lived in Gray Hollow his entire life. Bill wasn't like the others. He spoke of the phantom wolf without hesitation. "Don't go in those woods at night," Bill warned. "The wolf, it's not just a creature. It's a force, a spirit maybe. It doesn't just guide people, it traps them. I've seen it happen to folks I knew. They followed the wolf, and they never came back." Ethan nodded, scribbling notes. "Do you think it's supernatural?" Bill's eyes narrowed. "What do you think? I'd be a fool to say it's not." Ethan couldn't help but feel a shiver creep down his spine as Bill's words settled in. Still, he wasn't one to be swayed by superstition. He would find the truth, no matter how strange or unsettling it seemed. Ethan ventured into the forest the following day, armed with only a map, a camera, and a recorder. The atmosphere was thick with mist, the trees towering over him like silent sentinels. The forest was beautiful, but it felt wrong. The air was dense with tension, and the sounds of wildlife seemed muted, almost as if the creatures had retreated in fear. As he walked deeper into the forest, strange things began to happen. The usual sounds of the forest, birds calling, leaves rustling in the wind, were absent. Instead, he heard distant howls, the mournful cry of a wolf echoing through the trees. His skin prickled, but he pressed on, dismissing the eerie feeling as just part of the wilderness. The deeper he ventured, the more unsettling the forest became. Shadows shifted in the periphery of his vision, and every crack of a twig beneath his boots seemed amplified in the silence. His heart began to race. He hadn't expected the forest to feel so alive, so oppressive. That night, as he made camp in a small clearing, the howls returned, louder this time. It was as if the wolf was calling him, beckoning him further into the heart of the forest. A strange, inexplicable pull gripped him, but he resisted. The rational part of his mind told him it was nothing more than an animal, perhaps a wolf that had wandered too far from the usual pack. But when the fog rolled in, thick and suffocating, everything changed. Ethan was awake when it happened. The fog was so dense that he could barely see his own hand in front of his face. He'd heard the snap of branches, the soft padding of paws on the forest floor. Then he saw it. A silhouette. A large, shadowy figure emerged from the mist, glowing eyes piercing through the fog. It was a wolf, but unlike any he had ever seen. Its eyes shone with an unnatural light, and its movements were fluid, almost ethereal. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, The wolf simply stared at him, and then it turned and began walking deeper into the forest, as if beckoning him to follow. His heart raced. Every fiber of his being told him to run, to turn back. But the pull was too strong. Without thinking, he followed the creature. As he followed the wolf deeper into the forest, the atmosphere grew heavier. The trees became gnarled and twisted, their bark dark and slick with moisture. The path, if it could even be called that, became increasingly difficult to follow. The ground was soft and treacherous, and his mind began to play tricks on him. The wolf moved ahead, always just out of reach, but Ethan pressed on. He didn't know how long he had been walking when the wolf stopped in a clearing. Ethan stumbled forward, nearly tripping over the remnants of something, what appeared to be a torn backpack. He bent down, his heart sinking as he realized it wasn't just any backpack. It was the same design as the one worn by the hikers who had gone missing 5 years ago. Suddenly, the forest seemed to close in around him. His pulse quickened as he looked around, finding more remnants of the past victims. Tattered clothes, scattered belongings, and broken items scattered in a pattern that was almost too deliberate to be random. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the oppressive feeling grew stronger. As the wolf turned to face him once more, Ethan's mind raced. This wasn't just a creature, it was something else, something ancient. His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of visions, fleeting glimpses of other travelers, their faces pale and gaunt, trapped in the same nightmare he was experiencing. They spoke to him, their voices disjointed, pleading for him to leave before it was too late. "Turn back," one of them whispered. "You don't know what you're dealing with." But it was too late. Ethan realized the truth. The wolf was not just guiding him, it was leading him to his death. He had crossed a threshold he couldn't return from. Ethan's survival instincts kicked in. He needed to escape, but the forest was changing around him. The trees seemed to close in, the path becoming narrower, more twisted. The fog grew thicker, and the sounds of the forest, once so familiar, became distant and distorted, as if the very landscape had turned against him. The wolf appeared before him again, its eyes glowing brighter now, almost like a beacon. It stood tall and majestic, but there was something wrong in its gaze, something ancient and vengeful. Ethan knew this wasn't a normal animal. This was a spirit, a force of nature, twisted by centuries of sorrow and rage. He knew there was only one way out. He recalled the ancient ritual he had discovered in the journal of a long-lost explorer, a ritual that could break the spirit's hold on the forest. With trembling hands, he prepared the ingredients, a mixture of herbs and symbols carved into the ground, placing them in a circle. The wolf watched him silently, unblinking. Ethan began to chant the incantation. The air grew colder, the wolf's growl reverberating in his chest. The ground trembled beneath his feet, and the trees seemed to sway violently. He knew it was a gamble, but it was the only choice he had left. As the final words left his mouth, the wolf let out a deafening howl. The ground cracked open, and for a brief moment, Ethan saw a glimpse of something ancient, something primal and terrifying, before it all collapsed into darkness. When Ethan awoke, he was lying on the forest floor. The mist had cleared, and the air was eerily still. He could see the edge of the forest in the distance, the path leading back to Gray Hollow. He had survived. But at what cost? Ethan made his way back to the town, his body battered and his mind fractured. He tried to explain what had happened to the townsfolk, but they only looked at him with pity. They knew the forest's dark secrets, but no one spoke of them aloud. They had learned to leave well enough alone. Ethan's article was published, but it was met with skepticism. Some thought it was just a work of fiction. Others believed he had simply lost his mind. But deep down, Ethan knew the truth. The phantom wolf was real, and the forest would claim more victims. The final scene was haunting. Back in his apartment, as he sat staring at the forest map, he saw something in the corner of his eye, something in the shadows. A pair of glowing eyes stared back at him from the edge of the forest. The phantom wolf was waiting, and Ethan knew that it wasn't done with him yet. If you dare to venture into the unknown, if you're ready to confront the darkness that lurks within the wild, the phantom wolf of the wilderness is a journey you won't want to miss. Uncover the secrets of Grey Hollow, face the terrifying force that haunts the forest, and discover what happens when myths and reality collide. Are you ready to follow the wolf into the shadows? Like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on the latest twists in the story. Share your thoughts and theories with us, but remember, once you enter the forest, there's no turning back. Grab your copy now and dive into the mystery.